The scorched prairie stretched like a blood-stained tapestry beneath the merciless Wyoming sun of 1878. Amelia Ellis had been walking for 2 days, the soles of her boots worn thin, her throat parched to dust. The wagon train attack had come without warning, Comanche raiders striking just before dawn, their war cries splitting the air as they set fire to everything she had ever known. Now, as the last of her strength abandoned her, Amelia caught sight of the charred skeleton of her family's wagon, still smoldering against the vast emptiness of the frontier. Her knees buckled, the world tilting sideways as she collapsed beside the burned remnants of her former life. Yards away, Yates Xanders pulled his horse to an abrupt stop. He'd been tracking a small herd of wild mustangs when he spotted the plume of smoke on the horizon. Now, scanning the devastation before him, his keen eyes caught movement, a woman in a soot-stained dress falling to the ground beside the ruined wagon. Without hesitation, he spurred his chestnut stallion forward, the animal's powerful muscles responding instantly to his command. Dismounting in a smooth motion that spoke of years in the saddle, Yates knelt beside the unconscious woman. Her face was smudged with ash, her honey-brown hair escaping from a once neat bun. Gently he pressed his fingers to her neck, relieved to find a pulse, though it fluttered weakly beneath his touch. "Miss, can you hear me?" he called, his voice rough from disuse. When she didn't respond, he surveyed the carnage around them, the wagon reduced to charred wood and twisted metal, personal belongings scattered and broken across the prairie. No other survivors in sight. With practiced movements, Yates lifted the woman into his arms. She was light, too light, and he could feel her bones through the fabric of her dress. Carefully, he hoisted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, cradling her limp form against his chest. His homestead was too far, but Doc Miller's place in Whispering Creek was only an hour's hard ride. "Hold on, miss," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I've got you now." The stallion responded to his urgency, hooves pounding the packed earth as they raced toward civilization. Yates kept one arm firmly around the woman's waist, her head lolling against his shoulder as the landscape blurred around them. The sun beat down mercilessly, and he paused only once to trickle water from his canteen between her parched lips. By the time the modest buildings of Whispering Creek came into view, Yates could feel the woman stirring against him. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of summer storms, a deep, troubled gray. For a moment, confusion clouded her gaze, then terror as she realized she was on a horse with a stranger. "Easy now," Yates said, his voice deliberately gentle. "You're safe. I found you collapsed by a burned wagon. I'm taking you to the doctor." The woman tried to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged. Her body tensed, then sagged back against him as exhaustion claimed her once more. Doc Miller was on his front porch when Yates arrived, the old physician's eyebrows shooting upward at the sight of the unconscious woman. "What happened, Xanders?" he asked, already clearing space on his examination table as Yates carried her inside. "Found her out by Blackwater Ridge. Wagon train hit by raiders, looks like. She's the only one I saw alive." Yates set her down carefully, stepping back as the doctor began his examination. "Dehydration, exhaustion, minor burns on her hands," Doc Miller muttered, lifting each of her eyelids in turn. "No sign of serious injury that I can see. She's lucky you came along." Yates removed his hat, running a hand through his sun-bleached hair. "Will she be all right?" The doctor nodded. "With rest and care. She'll need somewhere to stay when she wakes. The hotel's full with that cattle buyers' convention." A moment of hesitation crossed Yates's weather-worn face. His ranch was isolated, his life solitary by choice since returning from the war. But the thought of this woman with nowhere to go. "She can stay at my place. I've got a spare room," he said finally. "Send word when she's able to travel." Doc Miller gave him a knowing look. "You sure about that? Town's gonna talk." "Let 'em," Yates replied shortly, replacing his hat. "I'll be back tomorrow." As he stepped back out into the harsh sunlight, Yates couldn't explain the strange protectiveness he felt toward the woman. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in her face, or the way she'd survived when others hadn't much like himself. Whatever the reason, he found himself looking back at the doctor's house before mounting his horse, wondering about the story behind those storm-gray eyes. Amelia awoke to unfamiliar surroundings. the soft glow of lamplight casting shadows on a whitewashed wall. For a moment, panic seized her, then memories flooded back, the attack, the flames, the endless walking. And then, a man's voice, strong arms carrying her. "You're awake," came a gentle voice. An elderly man with kind eyes approached her bedside. "I'm Dr. Miller. You're in Whispering Creek. Can you tell me your name?" "Amelia," she whispered, her throat still raw. "Amelia Ellis." The doctor helped her sip water from a tin cup. "You were found by Yates Xanders, one of our local ranchers. He brought you in yesterday evening." Yesterday? She'd lost an entire day. "My family," she began, though she already knew the answer. Doc Miller's expression softened with pity. "You were the only one Mr. Xanders found alive. I'm sorry." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she was too dehydrated to cry. The wagon train had consisted of 3 families, the Ellises, the Johnsons, and the Petersons, 15 people in all, including 5 children. All gone. "The man who found me," she said finally, her voice steadier. "I should thank him." "He'll be back today," Doc assured her. "He's offered you a place to stay while you recover. His ranch is a respectable establishment, and Mr. Xanders is a man of honor, despite his solitary ways." Amelia's brow furrowed. "I couldn't impose—" "Miss Ellis," the doctor interrupted gently. "You have no money, no belongings, and no family within 1,000 miles, if I understand correctly. The hotel is full, and I need this bed for other patients. Unless you have another suggestion, Mr. Xanders' offer is your best option until you can make other arrangements." Put that way, she had little choice. Still, the idea of staying alone with a strange man sent a frisson of unease through her. She had been raised with strict propriety in Boston before her father's reckless investments had forced them west in search of new opportunities. "Is there no widow or family in town who might take me in?" she asked, even as she recognized the futility of her question. Doc Miller shook his head. "It's a small settlement, Miss Ellis. Most folks are just getting by themselves." He patted her hand. "Mr. Xanders keeps to himself, but he's a decent man. Fought for the Union, built his ranch from nothing. There's no cause for concern." Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. When it opened, Amelia got her first clear look at the man who had saved her life. Yates Xanders filled the doorway, his broad shoulders and tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. He removed his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat fields, cropped short on the sides but slightly longer on top. His face was tanned and weathered from years under the open sky, with lines at the corners of eyes that were a startling clear blue. A neatly trimmed beard framed a mouth that looked unused to smiling. "Miss Ellis is awake, I see," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "Mr. Xanders," the doctor greeted him. "Perfect timing. I was just explaining your offer of accommodation." Those piercing blue eyes met Amelia's, and she felt an unexpected fluttering in her chest. "It's just until you're back on your feet, madam," he said. "I have a housekeeper who comes by 3 times a week. The room is small but clean." Amelia swallowed hard, lifting her chin slightly. "You saved my life, Mr. Xanders. I'm deeply grateful. If you're certain it's no imposition, I accept your hospitality until I can make other arrangements." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "The doc says you can travel tomorrow if you continue to improve. I'll return with the wagon around noon." He hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry about your people. No one should have to endure what you've been through." The simple sincerity in his words touched something raw within her. "Thank you," she whispered. With a nod, he replaced his hat and turned to go, pausing only to exchange a few quiet words with the doctor before the door closed behind him. "Well," said Doc Miller, a hint of amusement in his voice, "that's the most I've heard Yates Xanders say in one go in years. You must have made quite an impression." Amelia wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. "Do you know if there was any investigation of the attack? Were any of the bodies recovered?" The doctor's expression grew somber. "Sheriff Jenkins rode out with a posse when Mr. Xanders reported it. They buried those they found and brought back what personal effects they could salvage." He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "This was found near you. The sheriff thought it might be yours." Unwrapping it with trembling fingers, Amelia found her mother's cameo brooch, miraculously unharmed, and the small leather-bound Bible that had been her grandmother's. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she clutched these small remnants of her past. "Rest now," Doc Miller said gently. "You'll need your strength for tomorrow." As she drifted back to sleep, Amelia's thoughts turned to Yates Xanders and the strange twist of fate that had placed her life in his hands. She wondered what kind of man he truly was beneath that stoic exterior and what awaited her at his ranch in the wild Wyoming territory. True to his word, Yates arrived the next day with a wagon, its bed lined with blankets to cushion the journey. Amelia, dressed in a simple calico dress donated by one of the doctor's patients, waited on the porch, her meager belongings just the brooch Bible and a spare dress wrapped in a small bundle beside her. "Miss Ellis," Yates greeted her, tipping his hat. "Are you ready to depart?" She nodded, rising carefully. Though she'd regained much of her strength, her body still ached from the ordeal. "Yes, Mr. Xanders. Thank you again for your kindness." He simply inclined his head, then helped her into the wagon with strong, steady hands. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, and she quickly looked away, focusing instead on saying goodbye to Dr. Miller. The journey to Yates's ranch took nearly 2 hours, winding through rolling hills that eventually gave way to a picturesque valley. As they crested the final ridge, Amelia caught her first glimpse of what would be her temporary home. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a sturdy 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and in the distance she could see cattle grazing on the lush grass. It was beautiful, in a rugged way that spoke of hard work and determination. "It's lovely," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Yates glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. "It's not much compared to what folks have back east." "How did you know I'm from the east?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Your accent. Boston, if I had to guess." Amelia nodded, impressed. "You have a good ear, Mr. Xanders." "Spent some time there after the war," he explained, pulling the wagon to a stop before the house. "Never quite fit in, though." Before she could respond, the front door opened, and a plump, middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense expression emerged. "So this is our guest," she called, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached. "I'm Mrs. Gunderson, Mr. Xanders' housekeeper. Got your room all ready, Miss Ellis." Yates helped Amelia down from the wagon. "Mrs. Gunderson comes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday," he explained. "She's agreed to stay on full-time while you're here to ensure propriety." The consideration touched her. "That's very thoughtful of you both." "Come along now," Mrs. Gunderson said, taking charge. "You look dead on your feet, poor thing. Mr. Xanders said you've been through a terrible ordeal." Inside, the ranch house revealed itself to be surprisingly comfortable. The main floor contained a spacious kitchen with a large hearth, a dining area, and a sitting room with well-worn but quality furniture. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that piqued Amelia's curiosity. "You read, Mr. Xanders?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. He shrugged, appearing almost embarrassed. "Winter nights are long out here." Ms. Gunderson led them upstairs to a small but pleasant bedroom. A patchwork quilt covered the bed, and curtains of faded blue framed the window, which overlooked the valley. "Bathrooms down the hall," the housekeeper explained. "Mr. Xanders had indoor plumbing put in last year. Very modern." "I'll leave you to settle in," Yates said from the doorway. "Supper's at 6. Don't feel obliged to join if you're too tired." With that, he departed, his boots making solid sounds on the wooden staircase. "He's a man of few words," Mrs. Gunderson confided once he was out of earshot. "But a good man through and through. Lost his wife and baby son to fever before the war. Came back here afterward and built all this. Keeps to himself mostly, but folks respect him." Amelia absorbed this information, her heart aching for the losses he had endured. "I won't be staying long," she assured the housekeeper, "just until I can find work in a place of my own." Mrs. Gunderson gave her a knowing look. "We'll see, dear. Now, let's get you bathed and rested before supper." The hot bath was a luxury Amelia hadn't experienced in months. As she soaked in the copper tub, she contemplated her situation. She had no money, no family, and few skills that would be marketable in a frontier town. Teaching, perhaps, if there was a school, or work as a shop girl if any of the establishments would hire her. The future loomed, uncertain and daunting. When she descended for supper, wearing the freshly laundered dress Mrs. Gunderson had prepared, she found Yates waiting in the dining room. He stood as she entered, a gesture of Eastern politeness she hadn't expected. "Miss Ellis, you look much recovered," he said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you. I feel considerably better." She settled into her seat, watching as Mrs. Gunderson brought out a hearty meal of venison stew, fresh bread, and vegetables from what must be a kitchen garden. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Yates spoke again. "I should tell you I made inquiries in town. The stage to Cheyenne leaves every Thursday. From there, you could connect to trains heading east, if you've family willing to take you in." Amelia set down her spoon. "I have no family left, Mr. Xanders. My mother died when I was 14. And my father, he was killed in the attack." She swallowed hard. "We were heading to Oregon. My father believed there were opportunities there." Yates nodded slowly. "There's opportunity here, too, for those willing to work. Whispering Creek is growing. New businesses opening up. I taught school briefly in Boston," she offered, "and I can sew reasonably well. Town's looking for a teacher, actually. The last one married a miner and moved to Colorado." He took a sip of water. "If you're interested, I could speak to Mayor Hopkins." Hope flickered within her. "You would do that?" Those blue eyes studied her face. "You saved yourself, Miss Ellis. Walking 2 days after surviving that attack shows remarkable strength. You deserve a chance to build something new." Tears threatened, but Amelia blinked them back. "I would be very grateful for any assistance you could provide." The conversation shifted to safer topics. The operations of the ranch, the upcoming harvest festival in town, books they had both read. Amelia was surprised to discover Yates was well versed in literature, particularly history and the classics. As Mrs. Gunderson cleared the dishes, Yates rose. "I have some ledgers to review. Please make yourself comfortable in the sitting room if you wish. There are books, and Mrs. Gunderson mentioned you might enjoy needlework." "Thank you, but I think I'll retire early. It's been quite a day." He nodded, understanding. "Of course. Good night, Miss Ellis." "Good night, Mr. Xanders, and thank you again for everything." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Amelia realized she felt safe for the first time since the attack. There was something solid and dependable about Yates Xanders, a quiet strength that allowed her to believe, if only for a moment, that perhaps her future wasn't as bleak as it had seemed. The days settled into a routine. Each morning, Amelia would rise with the sun, helping Mrs. Gunderson prepare breakfast before Yates came in from his early chores. The housekeeper taught her to make bread in the ranch's large oven, and Amelia found unexpected satisfaction in the simple, physical task of kneading dough. Yates was often absent during the day, tending to his cattle or riding fence lines with his ranch hands, 4 weathered men who tipped their hats respectfully when introduced to Amelia, but otherwise kept their distance. In the evenings, however, they would share supper, their conversations gradually becoming less awkward as they discovered shared interests. A week after her arrival, Yates returned from town with news. "I spoke to Mayor Hopkins," he announced as they sat down to eat. "The town council is interested in meeting you about the teaching position. They've called a special session for Monday afternoon." Amelia's heart leapt. "That's wonderful news. Did they mention the terms?" "Room and board at the Widow Perkins's boarding house plus a small salary. Term would start in 3 weeks after the harvest festival." He hesitated. "It's not much, but it would give you independence." "It sounds perfect," she said sincerely. Then a practical concern surfaced. "But I have nothing suitable to wear for an interview." Mrs. Gunderson, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, spoke up. "I've been meaning to mention, Miss Ellis. A trunk of clothes was delivered from town yesterday. Sheriff Jenkins said they belonged to one of the other families in your wagon train. No survivors to claim them, so he thought you might make use of them." Amelia's throat tightened with emotion. The Petersons had lost their only daughter to consumption just before the journey. Mrs. Peterson, a woman about Amelia's size, had often spoken of her Sarah with loving pride. "That's very thoughtful," she managed. Yates watched her closely. "If it's too difficult—" "No," she interrupted. "Mrs. Peterson would have wanted her things to be useful. I would be honored to wear them. After supper, Amelia and Mrs. Gunderson examined the trunk's contents. Among the items was a serviceable navy blue dress with a lace collar perfectly appropriate for meeting the town council. As she held it up, Amelia caught Yates watching from the doorway, an unreadable expression on his face. "It will suit you," he said quietly, before disappearing back to his study. That night, Amelia lay awake, thinking about the opportunity before her. Teaching would provide stability, purpose, a place in the community. Yet the thought of leaving the ranch caused an unexpected pang. In just a week, she had grown accustomed to Yates's quiet presence, the sound of his boots on the porch, the way his rare smiles transformed his face. Foolish thoughts, she chided herself. Yates Xanders had shown her kindness, nothing more. She was a responsibility he had assumed out of decency, not any personal interest. Soon she would take her place in town, and their paths would likely rarely cross. Still, as sleep finally claimed her, Amelia dreamed of blue eyes watching her across a dinner table and the gentle touch of strong hands helping her down from a wagon. Monday arrived clear and crisp, with a hint of autumn in the air. Dressed in Mrs. Peterson's navy blue dress, her hair arranged neatly, Amelia waited on the porch for Yates to bring the wagon around. Mrs. Gunderson had fussed over her appearance all morning, clearly invested in her success with the town council. "You look very proper," Yates said as he helped her into the wagon, "like a school teacher already." "I hope the council agrees," Amelia replied, smoothing her skirts nervously. The ride to town seemed shorter than before, perhaps because Amelia now recognized landmarks along the way. Whispering Creek appeared more substantial in daylight, a growing frontier town with a main street of wooden buildings, including a general store, saloon, hotel, bank, and church. People moved purposefully along the boardwalks, pausing to greet Yates as he guided the wagon to the small building that served as the town hall. Mayor Hopkins was a portly man with enthusiastic handshakes and a booming voice. "Miss Ellis, terrible circumstances that bring you to us, but we're mighty pleased you might consider becoming our teacher. The children are running wild with no proper schooling these past months." The council consisted of 5 members, the mayor, the bank manager, the general store owner, the minister, and a stern-faced woman introduced as Mrs. Whitfield, head of the Ladies' Aid Society. They asked Amelia about her education, her teaching experience in Boston, and her views on discipline and curriculum. "We've got 12 children of school age," Mayor Hopkins explained, "ages 6 to 16, all levels of learning. Think you can manage that?" "In Boston, I taught a class of 28, Amelia replied confidently. "I believe in assessing each child's abilities and tailoring instruction accordingly. The older students can often help with the younger ones." Mrs. Whitfield leaned forward. "And what of your personal circumstances, Miss Ellis? You're currently residing at Mr. Xanders' ranch, I understand." The question carried an undercurrent of disapproval that made Amelia's cheeks warm. "Temporarily, yes. Mr. Xanders kindly offered shelter when I had nowhere else to go. Mrs. Gunderson serves as chaperone." "Yates Xanders is a respected member of this community," the minister interjected with a pointed look at Mrs. Whitfield. "His generosity does him credit." "Indeed," the mayor agreed. "Well, Miss Ellis, we'll need to confer. But I believe I speak for most when I say you seem admirably qualified for our needs. Assuming you're interested, that is." "I am very interested, Mr. Mayor. Teaching has always been my calling." "Excellent. If you'd step outside for a few moments." Yates was waiting on the boardwalk, hat in hands. "How did it go?" he asked as she emerged. "Well, I think. They're conferring now." Amelia's hands twisted nervously in her skirts. Mrs. Whitfield seemed concerned about my living arrangements. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Agatha Whitfield concerns herself with everyone's business. Pay her no mind." Before she could respond, Mayor Hopkins appeared at the door. "Miss Ellis, the council has reached a decision." Heart pounding, Amelia re-entered the town hall, aware of Yates following a few steps behind. "Miss Ellis," the mayor announced with a broad smile, "we would be honored to have you as Whispering Creek school teacher. Term to begin Monday, October 1st, following our Harvest Festival. Salary of $20 monthly, plus room and board at Widow Perkins's establishment. Are these terms acceptable?" Relief and joy flooded through her. "They are indeed, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this opportunity." Papers were signed, hands shaken, and arrangements made for Amelia to meet Mrs. Perkins the following day to see her accommodations. As they left the town hall, Amelia could barely contain her excitement. "I did it," she breathed, turning to Yates. "I have a position, a purpose." For once his smile came easily, lighting his eyes. "You did indeed. Congratulations, Miss Ellis. Whispering Creek is fortunate to have you." Impulsively, she touched his arm. "I owe this all to you, Mr. Xanders. Without your help." "You would have found another way," he interrupted gently. "You're a survivor, Amelia Ellis." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a tremor through her that had nothing to do with her recent success. "Perhaps we should celebrate," Yates suggested, gesturing toward the hotel's restaurant. "Dinner in town? Mrs. Gunderson gave me strict instructions to feed you properly after your ordeal with the council." Amelia laughed, surprised by this lighter side of him. "I would like that very much." The hotel restaurant was simple but clean, with white tablecloths and decent china. Several diners nodded greetings as they entered, curious eyes following them to a table by the window. "Everyone's looking at us," Amelia whispered as they were seated. "Small town," Yates replied with a shrug. "New school teachers, big news, and I rarely come to town except for supplies. So I'm not the only one being scrutinized," she teased, feeling uncharacteristically bold in her happiness. His eyes crinkled at the corners. "I suppose not." They ordered roast beef for him, chicken for her, and settled into conversation more easily than ever before. Yates told her about his plans for the ranch, how he hoped to expand his herd next spring, perhaps add more grazing land to the north. Amelia shared her ideas for the school, her excitement about shaping young minds in this growing community. "Will you stay for the Harvest Festival?" she asked as they finished their meal. "It sounds delightful." Something shifted in his expression. "I don't usually attend town gatherings." "Oh." Disappointment colored her voice before she could hide it. "Of course, you must be busy with the ranch." Yates studied her face for a long moment. "Would you like me to attend?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. Yes, I would. It would be nice to have a friendly face there, since I'll know almost no one." He nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. "Then I'll be there." The simple declaration warmed her more than it should have. As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering dusk, Amelia found herself stealing glances at Yates's profile, wondering at the complex man behind the quiet exterior. He had suffered losses she could barely imagine, yet retained the capacity for kindness, for helping a stranger in need. And now, as the stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, she realized with a start that her feelings for him had grown beyond simple gratitude. How foolish, she chided herself. In 2 weeks she would move to town, take up her position, build her new life. Yates would return to his solitary existence, their paths crossing only occasionally. Yet as his arm brushed hers when the wagon hit a rough patch, Amelia couldn't help wondering if perhaps he might feel something too, some small spark of the connection that was growing, undeniable and unexpected, between them. The next morning, Yates drove Amelia to meet Mrs. Perkins, whose boarding house stood at the quieter end of town, a 2-story clapboard structure with a well-tended garden. The widow herself was a brisk, practical woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "So you're the new teacher," she said, looking Amelia up and down. "You'll do, I suppose. Got rules in my house: no gentlemen callers in private, no alcohol, no coming in after 9 o'clock. Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon for those who are home, supper at 6 sharp. That suit you?" "Perfectly, Mrs. Perkins," Amelia assured her. "I appreciate your taking me in." The older woman's face softened slightly. "Heard about your troubles. Terrible business, that attack. You've shown grit coming through it like you have." She showed them the room that would be Amelia's, small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and chest of drawers. A window overlooked the garden, where late-blooming flowers still added splashes of color. "It's lovely," Amelia said sincerely. "I'll be very comfortable here." "School's just 2 blocks down," Mrs. Perkins continued. "Building needs some work, but the menfolk have promised to fix it up before term starts. Got books and slates stored in the back room." As they were leaving, the widow pulled Yates aside, speaking too quietly for Amelia to hear. Whatever she said made his jaw tighten, but he simply nodded and tipped his hat before escorting Amelia back to the wagon. "Is everything all right?" she asked as they pulled away. Yates's expression was unreadable. "Just town gossip. Nothing for you to worry about." But Amelia wasn't reassured. As they continued their tour of Whispering Creek, the school building with its single room and rows of rough-hewn desks, the church where Sunday socials were held, the general store where she could purchase supplies, she noticed the curious glances, the whispers behind hands as they passed. By the time they returned to the ranch, a heavy feeling had settled in Amelia's chest. "The townspeople disapprove of me staying with you," she said quietly as Yates helped her down from the wagon. He sighed, keeping hold of her hand a moment longer than necessary. "People talk. It's what they do when they have empty lives. But it could affect my position, the children's parents. Mayor Hopkins and the council hired you knowing your circumstances," Yates interrupted firmly. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." Looking into his eyes, Amelia wanted to believe him, but she had seen how reputations could be destroyed by mere suspicion back in Boston, how quickly judgment could fall on a woman alone in the world. "Perhaps I should move to Mrs. Perkins's sooner," she suggested reluctantly. "Before term begins." Something like hurt flashed across Yates's face before his expression closed off. "If that's what you want, Mrs. Gunderson will help you pack your things." "It's not what I want," Amelia admitted softly, "but it might be for the best." He said nothing more, simply nodded and strode toward the barn, his shoulders rigid beneath his worn shirt. Watching him go, Amelia felt as if something precious was slipping through her fingers, something she hadn't even realized she wanted until this moment. That evening, for the first time since her arrival, Yates did not join her for supper. Mrs. Gunderson served Amelia at the dining table alone, explaining that the master had taken his meal earlier and gone to check on a sick calf. "He's upset," Amelia guessed, pushing food around her plate without appetite. The housekeeper gave her a knowing look. "Mr. Xanders has grown accustomed to having you here, Miss Ellis. The house was too quiet before you came." "I've only been here a little over a week," Amelia protested. "Sometimes a week is all it takes," Mrs. Gunderson replied cryptically, "especially for a man who's been alone as long as he has." That night, unable to sleep, Amelia wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped onto the porch, drawn by the cool night air and the incredible canopy of stars overhead. She had just settled onto the porch swing when a movement caught her eye. Yates, returning from the barn, his figure silhouetted against the moonlit landscape. He paused when he saw her, then approached, his boots making hollow sounds on the wooden steps. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice low. "Too much on my mind," she admitted. After a moment's hesitation, he sat beside her on the swing, careful to maintain a proper distance. "Regrets about taking the position?" "No, not at all. I'm eager to begin teaching." She drew the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I was thinking about everything that's happened, how close I came to not being here at all." Yates was quiet for a long moment. "I dream about it sometimes," he finally said. "Finding you there, by that wagon. In my dreams, I'm too late." The raw admission caught her by surprise. "Yates, I know it's not proper, you being under my roof," he continued, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "But I can't bring myself to regret it, Amelia." The sound of her name on his lips for the second time sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "Nor can I," she whispered. He turned to her then, his eyes intense in the moonlight. "What are we doing here, Amelia?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities neither had dared acknowledge. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I only know that the thought of leaving hurts more than it should." His hand found hers on the swing between them, warm and calloused and strong. "Then don't go to Mrs. Perkins's early. Stay here until you must leave for the term." It wasn't proper. It wasn't sensible. But as his fingers intertwined with hers, Amelia couldn't imagine being anywhere else. "I'll stay," she agreed softly. They sat in companionable silence for a time, the swing moving gently beneath them, their joined hands a quiet acknowledgement of something growing between them, something neither was quite ready to name. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Amelia split her time between the ranch and the schoolhouse, cleaning and organizing the latter with help from several of the mothers whose children would soon be her pupils. Mrs. Whitfield maintained a cool distance, but the other ladies welcomed her warmly, eager for their offspring to resume learning. At the ranch, evenings took on a new quality. After Mrs. Gunderson departed for the night, Amelia and Yates would often sit in the study, reading or talking by lamplight. Sometimes he would tell her about the early days of the ranch, the challenges he had faced, the mistakes he had made. In turn, she shared stories of Boston, her dreams of travel that had been cut short by her father's financial ruin, her love of teaching. "You never married?" he asked one evening. The question clearly one he had been wanting to ask for some time. Amelia shook her head. "There was someone once, Robert Caldwell. He was my father's business partner's son. It was expected we would marry, but then my father's investments failed." She shrugged. "Robert's interest cooled considerably when my dowry disappeared." Yates's expression darkened. "He sounds like a fortunate escape." "I thought my heart was broken at the time," she admitted. "Now I realize it was only my pride that was wounded. I never truly loved him." She hesitated, then ventured, "Mrs. Gunderson mentioned you lost your wife and son. I'm so sorry, Yates." Pain flickered across his face, but he didn't shut down as she had feared. "Caroline and little James. Fever took them both within days of each other. I was away, surveying land to the north. By the time I got back," he swallowed hard. "I enlisted 2 weeks later. Didn't care much whether I lived or died then." Without thinking, Amelia reached for his hand. What changed? His fingers tightened around hers. The war. Seeing so much death, so much waste, made me realize Caroline would have been furious if I'd thrown away the life she couldn't keep. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She was a force of nature, my Caroline. Dragged me out here from Pennsylvania, insisted we could build something from nothing." "She sounds remarkable," Amelia said softly. She was. Yates met her eyes. "She would have liked you, I think." The words, simple as they were, felt like a benediction. That night when they parted at the top of the stairs, Yates lifted her hand to his lips in a gesture so unexpected and tender that Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Good night, Amelia," he murmured against her skin. "Good night, Yates," she managed to reply, her heart pounding as she retreated to her room. Lying awake in the darkness, Amelia confronted the truth she had been avoiding for days. She was falling in love with Yates Xanders. The realization should have frightened her. It was too soon, too complicated, too uncertain. Yet instead, it filled her with a quiet joy, like sunrise breaking over the mountains she could see from her window each morning. Whether he could ever return such feelings remained to be seen. But for now, it was enough to hold this newfound truth close to her heart, a private happiness in a life that had known too much sorrow. The day of the harvest festival dawned crisp and clear, the morning frost giving way to golden sunshine that bathed the valley in warm light. Excitement buzzed through the ranch as Amelia prepared for her first social event in Whispering Creek. She had carefully altered one of Mrs. Peterson's dresses, a pretty green calico with white trim that complemented her honey-brown hair. Mrs. Gunderson helped her arrange her hair in a more elaborate style than usual, with soft curls framing her face. "You look lovely, Miss Ellis," the housekeeper declared, standing back to admire her work, like a real lady. "Thank you, Mrs. Gunderson. Do you think—" Amelia hesitated, feeling suddenly shy. "Do you think Mr. Xanders will approve?" The older woman's eyes twinkled knowingly. "I think he'll find you a sight for sore eyes, miss." When Amelia descended the stairs, Yates was waiting in the hallway, dressed in what was clearly his best suit, dark wool, well cut though somewhat out of fashion, with a crisp white shirt and string tie. He had trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, and the effect was striking. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression one of frank admiration. "Amelia," he said finally, his voice rougher than usual. "You look beautiful." A blush warmed her cheeks. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." Mrs. Gunderson bustled past them with a basket of apple pies for the festival. "If you two are done making eyes at each other, we should get going. Town will be filling up fast." The comment only deepened Amelia's blush, but Yates merely offered his arm with a smile. "Shall we, Miss Ellis?" The town square had been transformed for the festival. Bunting and lanterns hung between buildings, tables laden with food lined one side, and a platform had been erected for musicians who were already tuning their instruments. Farmers from outlying homesteads mingled with townspeople, all in their Sunday best, while children darted between adults, their excited voices filling the air. As they arrived, Amelia was immediately surrounded by her future pupils and their mothers, all eager to speak with the new teacher. Yates slipped away to talk with some of the ranchers, but she caught him watching her across the crowd more than once, his eyes warm when they met hers. Mayor Hopkins officially opened the festival with a speech about community and prosperity, followed by a blessing from the minister. Then the dancing began. Lively reels and country dances that had couples swinging and laughing across the makeshift dance floor. Amelia found herself in demand as a partner, first the mayor, then the young bank clerk, then Dr. Miller. She enjoyed herself, though her eyes kept straying to Yates, who remained on the sidelines, engaged in conversation but not dancing. During a brief pause while the musicians refreshed themselves, Mrs. Whitfield approached Amelia, her perpetual frown firmly in place. "Miss Ellis, I trust your accommodations at Mrs. Perkins's are satisfactory?" "I haven't moved in yet," Amelia replied, straightening her shoulders. "I'll be doing so the day before term begins." The older woman's eyebrows rose. "Indeed, you continue to impose on Mr. Xanders' hospitality, then." "It's no imposition," came Yates's voice as he joined them, his expression cool as he regarded Mrs. Whitfield. "Miss Ellis is welcome at my ranch for as long as she wishes to stay." "How very generous of you, Mr. Xanders." The disapproval in her tone was unmistakable. "I wonder what your dear departed wife would think of such an arrangement." Yates's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Amelia laid a gentle hand on his arm. "Mrs. Whitfield, I understand your concern for propriety, but I can assure you Mr. Xanders has been nothing but a perfect gentleman. His kindness saved my life, and I will not have his reputation questioned because of me." Mrs. Whitfield seemed taken aback by the quiet dignity in Amelia's voice. "Well," she said after a moment, "at least you'll be properly situated by the time school begins." As she walked away, Yates covered Amelia's hand with his own. "Thank you for defending me," he said quietly, "but you needn't worry about my reputation." "I won't have her speaking ill of you because of your generosity to me," Amelia insisted. His eyes softened. "Dance with me?" The request surprised her. "I thought you didn't dance." "I said I don't usually attend town gatherings," he corrected with a small smile. "I didn't say I couldn't dance." As the music resumed, Yates led Amelia onto the floor. His hand at her waist was firm but gentle, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a tall man. They moved together as if they had danced 100 times before, her skirts swirling around them, his eyes never leaving her face. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, breathless from more than just the exertion. "Caroline insisted I learn before we married," he replied, guiding her through a turn. "Said she wouldn't have a husband who couldn't dance at their wedding." The mention of his wife didn't bring the shadow to his face that it once had. Instead, there was a fondness in his voice, a healing that Amelia was glad to witness. As the dance ended, Yates didn't immediately release her hand. "Walk with me?" he asked, gesturing toward the edge of the square, where lanterns lit a path along the creek that gave the town its name. Away from the noise and bustle of the festival, they strolled in comfortable silence for a time, the gurgling of the creek and the distant music the only sounds. Fireflies danced among the bushes, adding their magic to the evening. "I meant what I said earlier," Yates finally spoke. "You're welcome to stay at the ranch as long as you wish, even after school begins." Amelia looked up at him, trying to read his expression in the lantern light. "That would cause talk, Yates, more than there already is." "Let them talk." He stopped, turning to face her fully. "Amelia, these past weeks, having you at the ranch, it's like the place has come alive again. I've come alive again." Her heart began to race. "Yates, I know it's soon," he continued, his voice low and urgent. "Too soon, perhaps. You've been through a terrible ordeal. You're just beginning to rebuild your life. But I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond simple concern or friendship." Amelia couldn't speak, her throat tight with emotion as he took both her hands in his. I'm not asking for promises, Yates said, only that you consider the possibility of something between us. Something that might grow, in time, if you're willing. In the soft glow of the lanterns, with the music of the festival floating on the evening air, Amelia found her courage. I've been considering that possibility for some time now, she admitted softly, and finding it increasingly difficult to imagine my future without you in it. The hope that blazed in his eyes took her breath away. Amelia, he whispered, his hands tightening on hers. It's too soon for certainties, she agreed, but not too soon for hope, I think. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, Yates bent his head toward hers. Their lips met in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to Amelia's eyes, a promise, a beginning, a healing for them both. When they returned to the festival, hand in hand, there were knowing looks and whispers. But Amelia found she no longer cared. For the first time since the attack, she felt fully alive, fully present in her own life. The future still held challenges: her teaching position, the adjustment to life in Whispering Creek, the gradual exploration of her feelings for Yates and his for her. But as they joined the final dance of the evening, moving together in perfect harmony, Amelia knew with certainty that she had found something precious amid the ashes of her former life. Exactly 1 month after Amelia had collapsed beside that burned wagon, she stood before her class of 12 students, ranging from shy 6-year-old Tommy Baker to gangly 16-year-old Ruth Johnson. The schoolhouse had been transformed, floors scrubbed, windows washed, new chalk and slates provided by the town council. Amelia had arranged the desks in neat rows, younger children at the front, older ones behind. "Good morning, children," she began, her voice clear and confident. "I am Miss Ellis, and I will be your teacher. We have much to learn together this term, but first, I would like to know each of you." The children, scrubbed and nervous in their best clothes, introduced themselves one by one. Amelia noted their varying levels of education. Some could barely recite the alphabet, while others had advanced to basic mathematics. She would have her work cut out for her, but the challenge invigorated rather than daunted her. By the time the school day ended, Amelia had established rules, assigned reading, and begun to assess each child's abilities. As they filed out, several mothers waited in the schoolyard, eager for reports on their offspring's behavior. "They're wonderful children," Amelia assured them honestly. "Eager to learn and respectful. We'll make great progress this term, I'm certain." Even Mrs. Whitfield, who had come to collect her granddaughter, unbent enough to nod approvingly at Amelia's organized classroom. "You seem to have matters well in hand, Miss Ellis," she acknowledged grudgingly. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield. I hope to prove worthy of the council's trust." After the last child departed, Amelia sat at her desk, recording her impressions of each student's abilities in a ledger. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the door open, only becoming aware of a presence when a shadow fell across her page. Looking up, she found Yates watching her, his expression warm with pride. "How was your first day, Miss Ellis?" he asked formally, though his eyes held a more intimate question. "Challenging but rewarding," she replied, smiling up at him. "What brings you to town, Mr. Xanders? Supplies for the ranch?" "That too," he acknowledged, "but mostly I wanted to walk the new schoolteacher home, if she'll permit it." Since the Harvest Festival, Yates had been courting Amelia properly. She had moved to Mrs. Perkins's boarding house as planned, but he called on her regularly, taking her for drives on Sundays after church, escorting her to the occasional social event in town. They moved slowly, both aware of the scrutiny they were under, both still healing from their respective losses. "I would be delighted to have your escort, Mr. Xanders," Amelia said, gathering her things. They walked through town together, Amelia recounting amusing moments from her first day, Yates telling her about the new foal born at the ranch. People greeted them as they passed, the initial gossip having given way to acceptance as the nature of their relationship became clear, honorable, restrained, following the proper forms. At Mrs. Perkins's gate, they paused. The widow was notably absent from her usual post at the front window, a discretion for which Amelia was grateful. "Will you come to the ranch for Sunday dinner?" Yates asked. "Mrs. Gunderson says the place is too quiet without you. She's planning your favorite apple pie." "I'd like that very much," Amelia replied, her heart warming at the thought of returning to the place that, briefly, had felt like home. Yates took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I miss you there," he said simply. The admission touched her deeply. "I miss being there," she confessed. For a moment they stood in silence, the late afternoon sun gilding Yates's hair and warming his tanned skin. Amelia thought how far they had come from that first desperate meeting, she, half dead beside a burned wagon, he, a stranger offering salvation. "Amelia," Yates began, then hesitated, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. "I know we agreed to move slowly, to give ourselves time. But I find myself thinking of the future more and more these days. A future with you in it." Her breath caught. "Yates, I'm not proposing," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. That would be too soon for both of us. But I wanted you to know, when you're ready, if you ever are, that's where my heart is heading." Tears pricked behind Amelia's eyes. "Mine too," she whispered. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. Glancing quickly up and down the street to ensure they weren't observed, Yates bent and pressed a swift, tender kiss to her lips. "Until Sunday, then," he murmured. "Until Sunday," she echoed, her heart full. As he walked away, his tall figure straight and proud in the golden light, Amelia thought of the strange, terrible path that had brought her to this moment, the loss of her family, the desperate journey, the attack that had nearly claimed her life. From those ashes, something new had emerged, not just survival, but the promise of happiness, of love, of a future she had never imagined. 6 months later, on a perfect spring day with wildflowers carpeting the hills around Whispering Creek, Amelia Ellis became Amelia Xanders in a simple ceremony at the town church. The entire community turned out for the event, her pupils throwing flower petals as she entered, Mrs. Gunderson weeping openly in the front pew, even Mrs. Whitfield offering grudging congratulations at the reception afterward. "Never thought I'd see Yates Xanders wed again," Doc Miller commented as they shared cake in the church hall. "That attack was a terrible thing, Miss Ellis, Mrs. Xanders now, I should say, but I can't help thinking fate had a hand in bringing you two together." Amelia, radiant in a cream silk dress ordered from Denver, looked across the room to where her husband stood in conversation with the mayor. As if feeling her gaze, Yates glanced up, his eyes finding hers with unerring precision, a smile breaking across his face that was for her alone. "I think you may be right, Doctor," she agreed softly. "From tragedy to joy, a journey I never expected to make." Later that evening, as Yates drove their wagon not to Mrs. Perkins's boarding house, but to the ranch, their ranch now, Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder, content beyond words. "Happy, Mrs. Xanders?" he asked, his arm secure around her waist. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied honestly. "And you?" He pulled the wagon to a stop at the top of the ridge overlooking their home, the setting sun bathing the valley in amber light. "I once thought happiness was behind me," Yates said, turning to her with a depth of emotion in his eyes that took her breath away. "You proved me wrong, Amelia. You gave me a second chance I never thought to have." As he kissed her, there on the ridge with the world spread out below them, Amelia knew they had both been reborn from the ashes of their former lives, stronger together than they could ever have been apart, their shared future stretching before them like the endless promise of the western sky. And in the years that followed, as their family grew, as Whispering Creek flourished, as they faced challenges and celebrated triumphs side by side, they never forgot that moment of recognition beside a burned wagon, when a dying woman and a lonely man found in each other the healing they both desperately needed and the love neither had dared to hope for again.